Welcome everyone to Flatiron School's final project showcase, August edition. My name is Patricia Rodriguez. I am the events manager here. We're super excited to have you here tonight, and I am particularly super excited to be leading this event, an event that we host monthly here at Flatiron School, where we get the chance to highlight some of the final projects that our recent grads have completed. In this space, our presenters get the chance to dive deeply into the work they've done and show off what they have accomplished after completing their Flatiron School programs. This evening in particular, we have two projects that we will get the pleasure to learn a little bit more about. They're across both software engineering and data science. So for those of you who are joining us for product design or cybersecurity, please feel free to check out some of our previous showcases. With that being said, there will be plenty of time for questions throughout this event, in between the projects and afterwards. So do not hold back. I know our presenters are eager to hear from you all and learn a little bit more about what you guys are interested in. So a quick reminder before we get started that the chat feature is available, as well as the Q&A. If you resonate with anything that's being shared here, want to show encouragement, or just have any questions for our presenters, don't be shy and drop them there. If you're using the chat feature though, please make sure that you're sending your messages to everyone instead of the default option, which is to host and panelist, right? So with that being said, I'm going to start us off with the data science project from one of our recent grads, Nate, who has a background and love for politics. So Nate, please feel free to share your screen, and whenever you're ready, take it away.
I am on the Unitary executive theory. Starts from the idea of the separation of powers in the Constitution. That became hard to enforce with the rise of executive agencies and the bureaucracy in the post-depression era. Congress and the president both seem to have legitimate claims to jurisdiction. In the 70s, with Watergate and the resignation of Nixon, the presidency was very weak, and conservative legal theorists in the White House came up with a way of battling back, and namely the unitary executive theory, based on the Constitution's vesting clause at the beginning of Article 2. The executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. Notice that it's all of the executive power and one singular president, thus the unitary executive. Today, with a gridlocked Congress, presidents of both parties have found the theory extremely useful in accomplishing their agendas. Think about executive orders. So our question, have executive orders become more legislative over time? And can we build a model to investigate this question? Do executive orders more and more resemble what we traditionally think of as pieces of legislation? So if we look at the total number of executive orders, first, note that there's a huge number by FDR, not surprising given that so many of the executive agencies that are still with us today were established when FDR was president in the wake of the Great Depression. But if we zoom in on the last 10 presidents and then color by party, we can see that presidents of both parties utilize executive orders, about the same. And so let's take a little bit look at the data that we're going to examine. In creating our NLP model, our natural language processing model, we need two kinds of texts, executive and legislative, so we can compare them. The former corresponds to all of the executive orders since FDR, which we get by web scraping Wikisource, and the latter corresponds to all enacted laws since the 113th Congress, which we can access via Congress's API. You can see the total numbers on the screen. We can then talk a little bit about preparation. So after scraping or pulling the data, we have to prepare the text, right? So we start with what you can see on the first row, and I believe this is actually the very first executive order from FDR, right? So first we standardize it, so you can see it's all done lowercase. We tokenize it, we can create a list of all of the words rather than just a string of text. And then we lemmatize it, so instead of appointed, right, it becomes a point. You get the stem of all the words, and that makes it much easier to compare different texts. So we run this and standardized all of the text that we had scraped from the internet. So then we can get into the modeling a little bit. So there's a bunch of different types of models that you can use. I ran 3 and compared which were most successful. A multinomial naive Bayes, a random forest, and one called an XG boost. All of the models performed really well with at least 99.5% cross-validation accuracy. And this stands in sharp contrast to a dummy model, which was only around 63% accurate. Counterintuitively, they actually performed too well, so I extended the stop words, and we'll get into a little bit more detail about why that would be. So first, we can look at the words that were the most important for classifying a text as executive for the naive Bayes model. The higher up something is on the list, the more important the words were for classifying a text as executive. Here we have trigrams, right? 3 words together. We'll sometimes have bigrams, sometimes unigrams. It depends what is the most helpful in classifying a text. Notably, words legitimizing or justifying the authority of an order were paramount, right? Vested constitution, authority vested. This stands in contrast to legislative documents for which more formal, or excuse the circularity, more legalistic language is paramount. And interestingly, we can see that language involving the renaming of post offices appears very often on the legislative list. So, on, Elm Drive, right? Sergeant Smith. If we look at the random forest model, we again get a list of terms that are helpful in classifying texts. And again, authorization language is still paramount. And then again with XGBoost, in this case, authority vested is more relevant than all of the other terms put together. So given that we want a generalizable model that can judge the legislativeness of a text and doesn't put too much weight on obvious formalities of orders and laws, we're going to remove a number of words from the corpus, the entire body of text that makes up our subject. Executive and authority related words we'll remove, as well as the names of presidents and other procedural terms. Going back to the post office, incredibly 20% of laws enacted by Congress during the period at hand involves the renaming or naming of post offices. And so since these aren't that relevant, we will also remove them from the corpus. So our updated models then perform only very slightly worse, all still better than 98.8%. And the XGBoost model becomes slightly more accurate than the random forest. If we look at the associated words, we notice that executive orders tend to rely much more heavily on the word America. There's 2 ways to look at this. On the one hand, presidents are the only national representatives that the US has, so it makes sense that they would have a national focus. On the other hand, executive orders might tend to appeal to a logically suspect concept of a national mandate in order to lend the order more authority or legitimacy than it really has. And then here again, we can see the top legislative words, still pretty similar, still pretty legalistic. Again, the updated random forest, America is important here again, as are the formalities of legislation. And again, America and the formalities of legislation with the updated XGBoost. Also, we don't have a ton of time for this here, but I ran a latent Dirichlet allocation, an LDA, which is an unsupervised topic clustering. You sort of let the computer go off and throw things together in a way that is sensible by itself. I don't have time to go into it, but feel free to check out the notebook. There will be a link at the end if you want to play around with it. So concluding, if we take a look at the difference in the log probability by year, the blue is our executive corpus, the red is legislation. The higher up a given year is on the y-axis, excuse me, the more easily could the executive orders be correctly classified as executive. Put another way, if executive orders were becoming more legislative, we would expect to see a line with a negative slope. So here's the initial model, and then here's the final model. We might see a slight difference in the post-2000 executive orders, but it's far from clear. Perhaps more interesting, in 74-6, immediately after Watergate, when you have the White House legal team formulating the unitary executive theory, is the point at which the model has the most difficulty classifying executive orders correctly, or in other words, when executive orders appear to be the most legislative. And here we add a 5-year rolling average, just so it's not quite as jittery and hard to interpret. Maybe slightly clearer, but again, there's no clear trend towards the legislativeness of executive orders, as would be suggested by the adoption of the unitary executive theory. So conclusions, what can we draw? All of the models, it's easy to differentiate between executive and legislative. This remains true even after we got rid of some of the more formal words. Second, we start to see some changes around 1970, but there's not a clearly discernible trend. There's that interesting dip post-Watergate. And then third, executive orders show a concern with legitimization and authorization that we don't see in legislation. And there seem to be more claims to national representation for executive orders, which Congress cannot and need not make. And then some next steps. This should be expanded beyond purely executive orders to include agency rulemaking more generally, since so much of the legislation in the United States happens at the agency level. Second, we could pull in legislation from a much longer time period before the 113th Congress. It would be helpful, and the contemporary laws might already sort of bake in the abdication of a lot of legislative activity to the executive branch. And finally, there's great historical work on the topic. Combining that analysis with historical explanations would be great. Thank you. My contact info is there. Feel free to get in touch or take a look at the notebook. And thanks for your time.
Thank you, Nate. That was awesome. And I'm so glad that like you got to incorporate your love for politics and this already that you're already, keeping in track of and like incorporated into your project. I think it will be helpful for anyone that's just like stumbling across the final project showcase for the first time or doesn't have much knowledge of our programs. They will sort of notice that this project was very different to like building a product as they did in software engineering. So can you walk us through, number one, like how long you had to complete this project as a student and like what steps did you take to complete this?
Yeah, definitely. I think the final project was 2 weeks. It might have been a touch longer with the planning period, but about 2 weeks, right? And for me, I really wanted to do something on politics, and I had done some of the historical work that I talked about at the end is stuff that I was very familiar with. And so the unitary executive theory seemed really interesting, and it's a very hot button issue in the legal and American politics areas. And, so I had these cool new tools and I wanted to see, does it really matter? Is it having a real quantitative effect? And so then there was a decent amount of poking around and trying to see what data I could get that would let me answer that question, right? And natural language processing seemed like a very obvious example, right? Which takes a bunch of different words and says like, oh, this is very similar to this, or this is not very similar to this, and here's what differentiates the two. And so, as for example, Chris is talking about, a lot of the words are from PDF images and it doesn't work great. The National Register, which includes all of the rulemaking of agencies every year going back for a long time, is a great resource, but it's basically only in PDF, at least, after you go back a couple of years. And so what I did, at least for this project, and I do think that there would be interesting ways to expand it, is I took legislation as the basis of legislative text, and then executive orders as the basis of executive text, which really was sort of a stand-in for a better option with rulemaking, because executive orders are often pretty symbolic. But it was sort of the best way that I could think of to, given the time constraints and resource constraints, to investigate this question and try to give a compelling answer to what I was thinking and interested in answering.
And it was only 2 weeks too, so I feel like quick turnaround.
Yeah.
Rodney is asking, where do you extract the data from?
Yeah, these were both. So the first was web scraped. Wikisource has all of the executive orders ever just publicly available, and so I scraped all of that from FDR on. The legislation is from Congress's API, which is probably not terribly surprising, not the best formatted or well run. So it took a lot of repeated calls to this API, and they limit how many calls you can make. So the short answer is it comes from Congress itself and their API. The long answer is it was sort of difficult to do it in mass amounts, which is why I only went back to the 113th Congress.
Thank you. Jeffrey's asking, are there other countries where the unitary executive theory has been proposed? Would it be possible to use a similar analysis on that board?
That's a good question. So the unitary executive theory very specifically bears on the United States Constitution. So I think you would have to find similar theories, and I'm sure you do. Right, and some Latin American countries have very similar constitutions. Some Southeast Asian countries have very similar constitution to ours. The big France, yeah, the big divide, I think, would be presidential versus parliamentary versus mixed systems. And if you could then see sort of what different documents coming out of the different branches looks like in those different overarching constitutional structures would be. But it's a great idea.
So up next, we have Kyra. Kyra is a recent grad of our software engineering program and was also part of our Lovelace Fellowship. For those of you who are not aware, in 2024, Flatiron School relaunched their fellowship programs. And these fellowship programs were created to celebrate and empower historically underrepresented individuals in the tech community along their journey towards professional success. And we do so through providing exclusive access to like fellowship-related opportunities. So the Lovelace Fellowship in particular celebrates students and graduates who identify as women, and Kyra just happens to be one of our recent grads from it. So before joining Flatiron School, Kyra did have some knowledge of front-end development, holding a background in computer science and psychological and brain sciences from Washington University. And today, Kyra will walk us through her application, Healthseed, which is an organizational tool for managing health-related information. So without further ado, take it away.
So yeah, that was a great intro. You nailed it. You knew a lot of things. That was very impressive. Well, hi everyone. My name is Kyra Hamerling-Potts, and I am a recent grad of the software engineering program at Flatiron School. So I graduated about 2 months ago, and I have a background in clinical psychology research. So prior to doing Flatiron, I was working in a hospital setting in suicide prevention research. And a lot of the patients that I talked to, you know, they really had trouble remembering pieces of their information, especially when they were going through stressful times, things like appointments, their provider contact information, what medications they take. And I kind of saw a need for an intuitive, not overly complicated app to keep all this information in one place. And this is how my app Healthseed was born. As she said, it's an organizational tool for health information, things like doctors, routines, appointments, and I'll go ahead and show you the walkthrough. So first, I'll preface this by saying that this is a mobile app, so I used React Native, which is not covered in the Flatiron curriculum, but it's very similar to React and was very easy to learn, and they do cover React, so that is how I built this front end. I used a tool called Expo, which made it very easy to kind of like host this app and create my initial page. So that was an awesome tool to use. And for the backend, I used Python and I created a Flask API. And if you go through Flatiron School, you will learn all about that. It was really awesome to kind of connect the pieces together for front and back end. So when you open Healthseed, you'll start with this login page. Users can either create an account and enter some information like a username, their name, date of birth. I have a sample profile I'm going to use, so I'll go ahead and just log in with my credentials. We do have some validation at each step just to make sure that you're signing in with credentials that are in the system, so you'll be blocked if it's not. I'll enter the correct password this time. And you'll first be taken to a home page that has an overview of some of the more pressing information you might want to see. So first, you'll see a calendar view with dates marked with any appointments that you've logged in the app. As you can see, I logged an appointment for today, so it's giving me a little preview of what that appointment was. You also get a preview of routines that you've set up, and I'll go through both the appointments page and the routines page in more detail. But basically, this just gives you a place to see what you might have coming up immediately, and gives you an option to take a quick view of everything before you get into the details of the app. In this bottom navigation, we also have a tab called Conditions. This is pretty self-explanatory. This is a place where you can log any health conditions or mental health conditions that you might be facing. So I'm going to go ahead and add, let's just add type 1 diabetes. And when you save it, it'll be added to the page. With all of these pages, you have a lot of flexibility to add new information. You can edit each piece of information. You can also delete them. And that gives users a lot of flexibility with just managing all of these pieces of their health, which again, we need intuitive ways to do this. And that is why I created Healthseed. So there's also another way to navigate throughout the app. And this is in the drawer navigator in the top left corner. And this is where you get most of the pages of the app. We have providers, medications, routines, and appointments. So I'll go ahead and start with providers. I put in some sample providers here, and this is a place where you can log their names, their phone numbers, as well as their addresses. And this gives you a chance to also use this provider information later when you're creating an appointment. Similar to conditions, you can edit all of their information. You can delete providers, and I'll go ahead and add a sample provider so you can see what that looks like. Let's say Dr. Smith lives at 123 Main Street. We have a phone checker here that checks live as you're typing to make sure you're entering a valid phone number. And once you do, you're allowed to save the information. I have 2 Dr. Smiths on here because I added one earlier today. But you can see that this is, a pretty easy way to keep track of providers. When you have so many providers, especially when it was patients that I was seeing in the hospital settings, they had so many different kinds of doctors and so many health conditions that it's great to just have a place where you can easily look up their information and not make it too complicated. The next page is medications, and this one has a little bit more to it. On this page, you can both log medication names as well as any notes that you might have for taking these meds. And there's also another feature called medication instructions or dosages. You can see these little chips at the bottom of each medication where you can optionally add a dosage that you take of this medication as well as the time of day that you take it. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this medication and show you what it looks like when you create a new one. You can add a medication name. For notes, you don't have to add any notes, but I'll just say that we're going to take this one as needed. And on this initial creation page, you can add up to 3 dosages just to start off. You can also add more later, or you can leave this out. But each of these are drop downs where you can select dosage time as well as the actual dosage, and you can enter whatever information you want here. I'll go ahead and save this without a dosage, and we can see that it'll add on the screen with the option to now add instructions. So let's say that this person, this fake profile, takes propranolol in the evening and they take 20 milligrams. You can go ahead and save that and it'll update live on the screen. You can add more dosages as you see fit, or you can edit and delete each one by clicking on the chips directly. So I can change this to 40 and save it, and it'll be updated there. So that's an overview of what the medications tab looks like. The next one I'm going to look at is routines. And this one's very flexible. This is almost like a place to make notes of any daily habits that you might want to remember. These can be, something as simple as healthy snacking. So you can put down what snacks you like to eat as a healthy option. Or it can be a little more complex and you can write a more detailed routine and put some dosages of medications from the previous page that you want to associate with this routine. When you go to add a new routine, it'll prompt you for a title. So I'll create an after dinner routine. My description will be walk for 15 minutes to aid digestion. And here's where you can add medication instructions. So this page is essentially linked to the previous page that we looked at. Any dosages that you have on your medications page that have not already been assigned to a routine can be assigned here. So in this case, I'm going to assign Luvox and Buspirone, and I will minimize that. And you can also select a time of day for this. And you can select morning, afternoon, and evening. You can select one of the above. You can make it any time. In this case, I'm just going to say that this is an evening routine, and I'll go ahead and save this. And here we can see we have a new routine on the screen. You can edit and delete them. So I can delete Buspirone and save this. You can also delete the overall routine. One more feature of this page is that you can sort these or filter these by time. So they're all color marked just to make it really easy to see what you're doing at each time of day. Morning is yellow, afternoon is red, evening is purple, just because I think those are colors that we often associate with those times of day. And you can use these filters at the top to filter by what times you want to look at. So you can sort by morning and just see routines in the morning. You can also sort by evening and see those. You can have multiple filters at once. And that's an easy way to quickly navigate to the information that you might want to see. The final page here is appointments. And as I kind of mentioned before, this is linked up to your providers page. So when you create providers, that data is now available to you to add to your appointments. We can see that we have one upcoming appointment that I've already scheduled on the 19th. And you can also view all of your past appointments by clicking on this button at the top right. And you can scroll through those. I'm going to go ahead and log a sample appointment so you can see what it looks like to link those two. Every appointment comes with a date and time, a category, a provider, and a location. So I used some external libraries, date time pickers, to make this really simple where you can just see an overall calendar view and select from there. I'll go ahead and make an appointment for tomorrow at, let's just say, 3:16 p.m. You can select from 5 different categories or other if you don't feel like it fits into any of these: medical, vision, dental, mental health, or fitness and wellness. So I'll say this is a dental appointment, and now I can move on to select a provider. Now, when you select a provider for your appointment, it'll actually pop up on the screen with a little toast, is what they call it, just a little pop-up on your screen that has a location for that provider. So whatever you added to that provider's location, their address, it'll pop up on the screen and give you an option to copy it. This is totally optional, but it was just a way to make it a little bit easier rather than having to navigate back to the previous page. So I will select Dr. Michael Polowitz here, and I am going to copy the suggested address, and I'll paste it into my location. But again, that can be anything you want. You could simply call it home. Maybe you have a virtual appointment. You could put in a real address or a shorthand that you use. It's really flexible. It's totally up to you. And when you save the appointment, it'll automatically get sorted into the order of soonest to furthest away. Same for past appointments. You'll see the most recent things as well at the top. And so that's kind of an overview of the main features of the app. The last thing I'll show you is that from this home view here, we looked at home and conditions. You also have a profile page. And I would love to add some more functionality here and give users the option to maybe upload pictures or add even more detailed information about themselves, especially if a provider could be using this to manage their patients in the future. But for now, we have name, username, and birthday on the profile. And this is also where you can log out of the app. So as the final step in this demonstration, I will go ahead and log out. And that pretty much wraps up Healthseed. This was really fun to make. I had a lot of fun doing React Native. And again, it used a lot of the strategies from React. So it was an awesome exercise. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, or feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn too if you have questions there.
Ooh, great. We already have a question. Thank you so much, Kyra, for walking us through that. That was really cool. And I personally have some questions. Number one, I just wanted to ask you, are you planning on like continuing to work on this app? If so, like what features would you like, do you plan on continuing to enhance? I think like, especially like when it comes to like the routines tab, I'm like, that is really cool. And like, I think like, you know, is there a notification system for them? Like, is that something like you're thinking of, like maybe like a streak feature to like incentivize people using it? I will stop there. I got really excited about the project.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome question. And it kind of goes along with Kyle's question. Yeah, one of the features I would love to make is notification feature. I mean, I think that's really the best way to see when something is going to happen immediately. One of the limitations of doing this is that since it's mobile, the way for me to deploy it, it's an iOS app, I would have to actually post it on the Apple Store for other people to download. And you also have to have an Apple developer account. So that would really be the best way for me to test this, is if I feel confident enough in my data security and everything to make this available for the public. For now, it's just on my local simulator on my computer, but notifications is definitely something that I want to include. I would say that one other thing I would want is to also be able to differentiate account types. So providers versus patients versus, parents or loved ones. Right now it's targeted at the patient, but I saw many situations where providers might want to see a bunch of their patients and be able to access information that way. Or maybe your information is managed by a loved one or a parent, and they can have an external account and help manage that for you. So that would be a big project, probably bigger than notifications, but that is definitely something that I would want to work on as well.
We have another question here from Rodney to us. It says, hi, can you please break down the tech stack again, front end, back end, database design? How do you plan to implement HIPAA compliance?
Yeah, so for the front end, I used React Native, which is similar to React, and this was all done in JavaScript. So that's the main language that we use for front end here. And I believe I mentioned a tool called Expo. I really followed their tutorials closely. Expo was a way to more easily create an initial app. So we would do things like hosting native iOS and Android files, things that I wasn't really prepared to touch yet for this project. This was designed for iOS, but yeah, that was an awesome tool, and it'll give me a lot of functionality for like scaling this up in the future. For backend, I coded everything in Python. I used a PostgreSQL database. So I made that in Python, and then I deployed it onto a platform called Heroku. And there are lots of other platforms. One of the big ones is also called Render. I know Flatiron uses that a lot. And so that's the external source where I was able to access all of my database data. Let me think. Design. Yeah, design. I use some really cool libraries for this. There's one called React Native Paper. I don't know if you're familiar with Bootstrap or React Bootstrap, but it's essentially a styling library, an external one that's meant to work specifically with React Native. So that was really helpful. I used some things like the calendar picker, the date time picker, and got to integrate those into my app. And color schemes, I just kind of thought of what would be peaceful and wouldn't overwhelm someone. I just kind of chose like a muted green, blue, white color palette. Since this is a medical app, I didn't want it to be too overstimulating. HIPAA compliance, great question. I'm not sure yet. I have a lot of experience working with HIPAA compliant technology, like Zoom is one of them for licensed providers. I would need to do a lot of work before I release this to possible patients to make sure it was HIPAA compliant. There's probably a whole cybersecurity section of this app that I could use help with, and I would love to be able to integrate this project with other people, maybe other Flatiron grads, like cybersecurity and data analysis, and I know they could help me make this HIPAA compliant. So good question, and I'm continuing to think about it. I think that would be really cool to do.
I was just about to say, I feel like this can be some cross collaboration going on
Yeah.
with other disciplines. So for sure. And one last question, and then at the end, again, we'll have the opportunity to ask both Nate and Kyra additional questions. But if I take a medicine every 8 hours, then I would have to add as an instruction, since you can only add one time of the day per medicine. Sorry, I may have read that completely wrong. Let me repeat that. If I take a medicine every 8 hours, then I will have to add it as an instruction, since you can only add one time of the day per medicine.
So you can add as many instructions as you want. Each instruction will have one time of day. So I can have, the medication I added in there, propranolol. I can have that evening dosage, but I can also click on the little chip that had a plus sign and add another one. So I can add a different dosage even for the morning. The reason I separated them like that is because sometimes people take different dosages of one kind of medication at different times of the day. They might split it up differently. If not, they can still just log, 20 in the morning, 20 in the evening, and that's totally fine. But yeah, you can log as many as you want. That's the intention, at least. 3 when you create it initially, and then as many as you want later.
So we have Zilda who's asking, did you both attend the program full-time or part-time? Oh, Kyra, you're muted.
I did the flex program, which is self-paced part-time. I kind of treated it like full-time. Like I just kind of made my own schedule and did like a normal work schedule amount. I know that doing the full-time in software engineering is sometimes a little bit more than a regular full-time schedule. So that's pretty much what I did. And yeah, I really liked making my own schedule and time management and everything. So felt like a good fit for me. Gave me some more time to do my capstone too. 2 weeks is really impressive for that project, by the way.
I agree.
Thank you. I mean, very much dictated by the constraints. I was full-time, so from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. East Coast time, although I'm actually on the West Coast, so it was a sort of brutal 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., but then you had the afternoon. It was great. And so, in the same way that some people might benefit from being able to make their own schedule, I sort of need structure and a more rigid, defined day. And so that ended up being helpful for me.
I need a little structure, I'm not gonna lie. Any other questions? In the meantime, I'm gonna ask you guys, like now that you guys are on the other side, you guys have graduated, have completed the program. What is one thing that you wish you knew before starting this whole process?
I would say I wish I had more confidence in my ability to learn new technical skills. I had like a little bit of a background beforehand, doing pretty much only front end and touched React for like 2 seconds. I really didn't get into the nitty-gritty of it beforehand. And I didn't know how I would possibly grasp Python and backend. Like it was this whole new world. But really the way the curriculum is guided, it makes it very doable. And I've also gotten a little bit more confidence just knowing that even if I don't have a lot of direction, I can figure something out because there's so many resources available. Open source is amazing. And that's one of the great things about being in this field. So I wish I knew how doable it was and how much I'd really be able to teach myself as well. I don't know if that's kind of a cop-out answer. Like it's not a specific technology I wish I knew, but yeah, I wish I knew that kind of mindset before I went into it.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think that's a feeling that a lot of career transitioners feel of like that not syndrome, but kind of that imposter syndrome, like, hey, like, am I even like, will I be able to do this? Will I be able to complete this? And I feel like with you all completing this program, you guys have all shown yourselves that you guys can, and that with any other language or technology that you guys choose to learn, that you guys are capable of doing so. So I think that's very exciting. How about you, Nate?
I would say, right, even for the full-time boot camp, to make sure that you are really ready to like put in the time. So, as with the, 3 months, whatever it was, 4 months, there were weeks when I had more time and weeks when I didn't have as much time, and just making sure that I really could deep dive on the concepts and get the most out of it, and just sort of have that sort of hard work growth mindset was very important. And I can even still like, oh, we were doing hypothesis testing this week and I'm still shakier on it, and it's noticeable. And then you can go back and fill it in, but it's a lot easier if you don't have to.
Sure. Someone asked here, is the program mostly self-paced? So we have through different type of programs. You have the live or the in-person program, which is for 15 weeks, that you are required to be in class from 9 to 6 p.m. And that is very intensive. That is for someone that is looking to make that change right away. And then we have our flex programs. Our flex program is for individuals who need that flexibility, who may have a full-time job, maybe have other responsibilities, and it is self-paced. So you are more than welcome to go through the program as fast or as slow as you can. As you want, and I think in both programs, it pretty much depends on the type of the preferences that you have and what you currently need. So yeah. Some questions here. We have, what is your favorite technology? What do you plan to learn next? Yeah, kick it off with that.
Favorite technology. That's hard. I mean, I really, really like front end, but specifically I like connecting it to back end. So I do like kind of the creative aspect of seeing my designs on a page, but it's also really fun to understand the communication between, like, what happens when a person clicks a button on a page, how is that sent to the server, and then how is a response given back to that person. So I would say that learning Flask, which is how we created APIs, that was probably my favorite technology that I learned. It's a great like micro framework for creating RESTful APIs, and it made it very intuitive. So it's basically just the middleman between your database and then what you're seeing on the front end. That's what actually handles the logic going from the screen to the server. So that was really cool to learn. I feel like that was kind of the missing puzzle piece with everything.
Well, I mean, favorite technology broadly is Wikipedia, because I think it's the coolest thing, just like internet at its best. But then, I mean, there's just lots of cool. I really love natural language processing, right? I came from especially a political theory background. And so being able to take sort of the wishy-washy stuff that I did and make it a little more concrete is really cool. And there's a lot of really cool open source natural language processing packages that you can use to compare different texts and just draw cool conclusions that you wouldn't be able to do just by reading on your own.
NLP is cool, I agree. Where do you both go from here in terms of career?
So in terms of career, I mean, ultimately, I want to be a full stack software engineer. I could see myself as it goes on, either continuing on in my technical roles and becoming more senior in that way, or maybe even becoming a manager of engineering teams if I want to get some more like people managing, more of that aspect in it. I just started a contract role, and it's like front end focused, but it's full stack. So I'm getting exposed to a lot of new technologies. I realized I didn't quite answer that part of the question before. Next thing I want to learn is some more back end stuff like Express, which would be replacing Flask. It's like a bigger web framework for APIs. So that'd be really cool. But yeah, I'm going to see where this opportunity goes. I've only been doing it for like a week, so there's a lot to learn still. Thank you. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
And I'm sort of torn between pursuing more data journalism-y stuff, right? So, deep dives on politics type stuff would be ideal. Or the master's I have is like 2/3 of the way through a PhD. And so whether I should really just go back and finish that now that I have more tools at my disposal. Although that's a little hard to stomach right now.
Right. No, I think either one of those choices would be wonderful. So I'm looking forward to seeing which way you go, for sure. We have one more question. What would you say your biggest gap? Oh, sorry. What would you say your biggest gap in knowledge is coming out of boot camp?
The technical piece honestly feels very solid. I mean, there are endless things to learn. As I was looking at job postings, I saw, some of them wanted Ruby on Rails, even though people are kind of moving away from that to Python. I know that previous cohorts did Ruby on Rails, so I'm a little curious to learn a little bit about that. TypeScript, I think, would be a big one, because it's, another way to work in kind of React JavaScript land, and I do see that a lot too. But really, we kind of covered the bases of a lot of things, maybe more about Git and like collaboration, because in jobs, you'll be collaborating on big projects rather than just solo or small group projects. So learning like the version control in a little bit more detail would be helpful. And that's not difficult. That's like really simple. So I'm really glad that we focused a lot on the actual languages and technology there, but Git was something I I found myself trying to learn very quickly over the past week. So maybe that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think again, sort of on the academic side, I wish I had a little bit of a better understanding and the hypothesis testing and when you're allowed to make a statistical inference and when you're not, and what allows you to say you can, how you can control for different elements. A lot of that I think is just not as important in a lot of data analysis that you'll do day to day. But you know, so I think it would be interesting and helpful to learn more about that theoretical background. But certainly, the data analysis, data science course doesn't promise to be sort of a statistics boot camp too, which is I think what would be the next step for me.
I can totally see that for sure. I guess last question. Oh no, there's more questions. I love this, guys. I love that. I love the engagement. Have you or do you plan to make a portfolio site?
Yes, I have one and I just sent it in the chat. That was a cool opportunity to just create another coding project. So yeah, that was fun too. It's almost like my portfolio is a piece of my portfolio.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Rodney, how many projects are completed throughout the program? Do students complete the program with a portfolio?
So I'm not sure if it varies. So I can probably let you elaborate on this, but for software engineering, it's 5 phases, so 5 projects, and they get more comprehensive as it goes on. So your capstone is full stack and the best one that you'll ever make. But yeah, 5 projects. I don't know about data science, so.
Yeah, I think I should probably remember this off the top of my head, but it was about 5 projects. I was gonna say 6 maybe, but I think 5. And yeah, you can see all of them listed on my GitHub. I should make it a little prettier than it is, but they're all there, and you come out with a bunch of things you can point to.
Thank you for answering that. And I believe the only one that doesn't have the final project like presentation or like even like project like that is cybersecurity, just because their project is more like hacking, like are you able to hack into something? So that's the only one that's different, but I think for the most part across all disciplines you should expect 4 to 5 projects. Okay, yep, people just sharing more information there. I will allow one more question if anyone has one last question. But if not, again, thank you so much, Kyra and Nate, for sharing your projects, your experience, and just sharing just these valuable insights that people will now be able to utilize to, number one, continue making the steps to make that career transition. 2, sign on to a program at Flatiron School if you think that this is the opportunity for you and you would love to explore that more with us. Or hey, just learn more about what are people doing in the tech space and 2 promising voices and seeing where that goes. So once this event is completed, you should find this event on our website, on our YouTube channel. I will drop the link right now. We post all of our events there, and you should expect this within the next week. So within a week, you should have that uploaded. Give me one moment, and I'll share that with you all. Again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to drop them here. And I'll also share with you all our flatironschool.com events page. If you are looking to, sorry, let me not try to do both things at the same time. Second. And of course, the internet would suck when you're trying to share valuable information with people. Awesome. Here we go. Yes, so this is the page where you can find any of our events. I encourage you all to check out flatironschool.com/events. We have some very exciting events coming up. I think these events are wonderful to kind of get a first-hand experience as to like what that's the type of work that our students do. But if you're looking for more social events, more opportunities to network with other Flatiron School grads, alumni, or just members of the community, I really encourage you all to check out the Merge. We have the Merge NYC, which is taking place on September 17th. If you're near the tri-state area, I encourage you to come on campus. We'll have a panel discussion about the transition from education to tech. There will be food and refreshments. So this is a great opportunity to just network with other like-minded individuals in the NYC tech space. And if you're not in the tri-state area, no worries. We do have the Merge Virtual, which is going to be hosted on September 19th. And it is exactly the same event, a networking mixer, just virtually. You'll have the chance to break out into rooms and have one-on-one conversations with people. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have not already, I encourage you both, I encourage everyone to connect with Kyra or Nate on LinkedIn. I'm going to drop their LinkedIn's again. One moment. And again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Okay.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you guys for all your suggestions in the comments too. It's very helpful.